In at number 5 we have Ghost Castle. In the town of Beoš in Serbia on the slopes of Fruška Gora mountains rests an abandoned building in ruins and long forgotten. Known originally as the Spitzer Castle, it was once one of the most beautiful sights in all of Serbia, with glass gardens, peacocks and deer, somewhere you would only hear about in a fairy tale. It was built in the late 19th century by Edward Eddie Spitzer, who was the co-owner of the Beošin cement factory. Spitzer hired the famous architect Imre Stindl, best known for his work on the Hungarian Parliament building in Budapest. The architectural styles of Spitzer Castle include elements of Gothic, Renaissance, Baroque and Romanesque art. In 1889 the mansion had been finished and the Spitzer family moved into the castle and lived there until World War II, then leaving in 1941 and moving to Germany. After the war, the ownership of the castle went to the state, and then at various points in time it hosted a school, library, the first Beošin radio station and a restaurant, but as time went on the building was slowly deteriorating. It was also used as a film set for many movies, including the 1970 American war film Kelly's Heroes starring Clint Eastwood. Today the castle is deserted, surrounded by wires, without door or windows and crumbling rooftops. The locals had nicknamed the building as the Ghost House due to many people hearing, seeing and coming into contact with paranormal entities. On more than one account, people hear footsteps and screams coming from one of the bedrooms. This creepy, decaying building is scary enough, but many dark tourism enthusiasts come here to see if they too can come into contact with any ghosts and haunted beings. There is a theory from the locals that a boy was roaming the home with his friends, but had gone off on his own and never returned. The boy's friends said they heard screams, and when they had run over to the area it was coming from nothing. They had searched in and around the building, but the boy was never found, and to this day people still hear his screams. This is one place you should never visit because you may never come back. Coming in at number 4 we have Devil's Town. Devolja Veros, which translates to English as Devil's Town, is a very unusual rock formation said to be created by soul erosion. These peculiar rock towers are located between the Devil's Gully and Hell's Gully near the town of Kuršumlija in southern Serbia. Located on Mount Radan are more than 200 stone formations, 2 to 15 meters high and up to 3 meters wide, with strange stone caps. This particular place is a huge tourist destination, not only because of its beautiful and unique looking rock towers, but also because of the legend surrounding this eerie place. Locals believe that these weird looking rock formations are actually petrified remains of a cursed wedding party. Apparently these poor people drank from a nearby spring, which attracted the devil himself, who tried to cloud their minds and force a brother and sister into marriage. Once the word got to a local fairy, she decided to interfere and turn them all into stone. The locals still insist that the area is haunted by the devil and refuse to spend a night there. If you're brave enough to go to this cursed place, all I have to say is don't overstay your welcome. Devil's Town and their odd looking rock towers continue to be a very rare natural phenomenon, and was actually a nominee in the new 7 Wonders of Nature campaign. Definitely one of the most visited places in Serbia, whether it's because its beauty or its haunted past. It's unknown its true origins, but it's definitely a very creepy place. If you're still willing to travel and see this place, maybe just leave before the sun sets, just in case. Coming in at number 3 we have the Skull Tower. This stone structure is located in Nis, Serbia, and almost 1,000 human skulls are embedded in the walls. Constructed by the Ottoman Empire in 1809 following the Battle of Zagar during the First Serbian Uprising. During the battle, Serbian rebels under the command of Stephen Sindelik were surrounded by the Ottomans on Siga Hill near Nis. Knowing that he and his fighters would be killed if they were captured, Stephen detonated a powder magazine within the rebel entrenchment, killing not only himself but also his fighters and the Ottoman soldiers. After this massacre, the governor of the Rumelia Eyalet, Hushid Pasha, ordered that a tower be made from the skulls of the fallen. The tower is 15 feet high and consisted of 952 skulls embedded on 4 sides in 14 rows. So many lives were lost at the Skull Tower, and the history and skulls displayed are proof of that, and many believe that these lost souls still roam the area and is considered to be a very haunted attraction in Siberia. In 1861, Mithat Pasha, the last Ottoman governor of Nis, ordered that the Skull Tower be dismantled, but that did not happen. It was eventually restored and the chapel was renovated in 1937. In 1948, Skull Tower and the chapel enclosing it were declared cultural monuments of exceptional importance and came under protection of the Socialist Republic of Serbia, and further renovation of the chapel occurred in 1989. Many Serbians see this display as a symbol of the country's struggle for independence. As of this year, only 58 skulls remain remain in the tower walls, and Cinderleck's skull is said to be featured in an enclosed glass container next to the structure. The Skull Tower is a very popular tourist attraction, visited by 30,000 to 50,000 people annually to see this eerie and creepy display. Coming in at number 2 we have Mount RtanJ. This is a mountain located in eastern Serbia between the towns of Boljevac and Soka Banja, and is one of the highest peaks in Serbia and is another huge phenomenon. Many stories have emerged from onlookers and tourists that go to RtanJ, stories about unusual flying objects which circle around the peak, fiery spheres, aliens and voices in unknown languages have been some of many things people experience here. This mountain is also talked about by many due to its beauty, size and perfect geometrical shape resembling a pyramid. RtanJ actually has the same angle of inclination as the Pyramid of the Moon in Mexico, and same angles as the Pyramid of Cheops, and many believe that this is not coincidence. The mystery surrounding RtanJ is still the reason for many scientists' arguments. Some say the mountain is actually an ancient pyramid, a natural wonder, the work of a higher power of even aliens. Another local legend explains that the castle of a wizard was located on RtanJ mountain, where he held his treasure, but the castle had eventually disappeared within the mountain, trapping the wealthy sorcerer inside with his treasures, making this a very popular location for treasure hunters in search for lost gold and gems. So many questions loom over Mount RtanJ and has created a whirlwind of theories and tourists to come and try and experience the many things rumored to happen here. Others come to RtanJ for the rare healing herbs that grow in the mountains, and it emits a type of energy which is beneficial to human health, but this is only a rumor. Everyone who has visited this mountain say they experience a mysterious energy. We may never know if this is positive or negative. And finally, in at number 1 we have Sava Savanovic's Mill. This is one of the most well-known places in Serbia for its ghost stories. This mill is located in the hill of the small village of Saroj in the west-central part of Serbia, 3 hours away from the town of Belgrade. The story is that Sava Savanic was a vampire and the first ever vampire that resided at this mill. According to one story, Sava was a wealthy cattle trader and he had fallen in love with a much younger girl who he had proposed to, but she had rejected him. Blinded by anger and jealousy, he decided to kill the girl. After the locals of Saroj found out, they beat Sava to death and buried him outside the local cemetery. But actually, Sava had risen and became a vampire and began drowning everyone who would come to grind grain in his mill. For years, the locals of Saroj lived in fear of the murderous vampire until they came together and stabbed him with a hawthorn skate, killing him forever. And legend says that a butterfly escaped from Sava's grave, which meant that Sava is still visiting the mill to this day. The citizens of the village tell many stories about the horror they have faced from this creature, and it's the most known horror story throughout all of Serbia. And in 1880, one of the most famous Serbian authors, Milovan Glisic, wrote the book 90 Years Later, rooting from the story of this famous vampire, and was in fact published 17 years before Bram Stoker's Dracula. And then in 1973, all of the stories of the vampire were turned into Serbia's first horror film, Butterfly. The old Sava mill was left abandoned for a long time until it was renovated by the local owner of the village cafeteria, and after all of these stories swirling, Sava has become a local legend, and tourists come from near and far to visit this mill. Many still believe that Sava to this day still haunts the mill, and it's considered one of the most haunted places in all of Serbia.
Number 5 on this list is the Hotel of Doom. Yep guys, there's literally a hotel in North Korea that's been nicknamed the Hotel of Doom. It sounds like something straight out of an Austin Powers movie, but I can promise you that Dr. Evil is not residing there. That's because the hotel itself, the largest building in all of North Korea, has never had a single guest in it ever. It's completely abandoned and never fulfilled its initial purpose of being the most prestigious hotel in North Korea. In fact, according to the Guinness Book of World Records, the 1,080-foot tall building is the tallest unoccupied building on the entire planet. 105 stories of just absolute nothingness. North Korea never finished the building because they just simply ran out of money. The whole country is estimated to have a gross domestic product of about $40 billion, and the building is estimated to take roughly $2 billion to finish. So, to finish this hotel, the country would need to allot 5% of all its money to get it done. Needless to say, it won't be happening anytime soon. Even though this Hotel of Doom is isn't housing any human visitors, that doesn't mean that someone isn't putting it to good use though. Well, maybe someone is a poor choice of words. It might be better to say something. Since the exterior construction of it finished in 2008, there have been rumors circulating about some sort of creature living in this hotel. Not a physical being like a werewolf or a beast of some kind, but a shadow figure that floats throughout. A little bit like a Dementor from Harry Potter, but even less humanoid than those were. The sightings have been few and far between because no one ever goes into the hotel. It's only ever been spotted from the ground looking up. People have reported a sense of uneasiness when walking past this building, but the building itself is also very intimidating. North Korea doesn't have many buildings of this stature, so this one definitely sticks out like a sore thumb. If a shadow creature has taken up residence here, then it's honestly done pretty well for itself. In fact, it may own one of the most expensive, albeit unfinished, properties in all of North Korea. Number 4 on this list is the prisons. And yes, you did hear that properly, guys. Prisons as in plural, not just one, but all of them. North Korea is very secretive about everything that goes on there, so making a list about this country is pretty tough. Because of that, it's hard to identify one specific prison that's haunted, but based on the stories of these places, I'd honestly assume that all of them are. The amount of death that happens at North Korean prisons is actually messed up. In fact, a judge who survived Auschwitz said that these prisons are just as bad. The first section on Wikipedia in regards to these prisons writes, North Korean prison camps have conditions that are unsanitary, life-threatening, and are comparable to historical concentration camps. A significant number of prisoners have died each year since they are subject to torture and inhumane treatment. Public and secret executions of prisoners, even children, especially in cases of attempted escape, are commonplace. The mortality rate is exceptionally high because many prisoners die of starvation, illness, work accidents, or torture. There have also been reports that even if your father committed a crime, for instance, well, you'll also go to jail for it. Innocent people are being sent into these places with no due process and dying in these horrible and harsh environments all the time. Just how some of those German camps are haunted by those who were taken far too soon, I have to imagine that the same thing's going on here. Now, we don't know for sure, and there aren't any specific stories that have come to the light, but that's mostly because North Korea keeps all their info airtight, and there have only been a few stories that have even come out about survivors of this place. I feel like it goes without saying, but obviously, this is a spot that you should just never go. Number 3 on this list is Kim Jong-il's tomb. Kim Jong-il was the leader of North Korea for almost 20 years before passing in 2011. The Kumsusan Memorial Palace is a massive palace that used to house the initial ruler of North Korea, Kim Jong-il's father, Kim Il-sung. Once he died though, this massive place was converted into a mausoleum to respect the great leader and then later his son as well. This place is creepy as all holy hell though, and is definitely haunted by these old leaders. Let's just take a quick look at what they currently have Kim Jong-il chilling in. It's this massive all glass container that he's been mummified in. His embalmed body just lies there all the time, and it's actually a tourist attraction now. North Korea has opened this up to the public if you want to go and pay your respects to their great leader. If you do go, which I don't recommend doing because it's super creepy and kind of weird, but if you do, then ABC News writes, all visitors are required to pass through jets of air to cleanse them of dust. Tourists are required to bow at the feet and arms of the dead father and son. However, they are not permitted to bow at the head as it's considered disrespectful. Cameras and phones are not allowed. Apparently, the ghosts of these two former North Korean leaders haunt this place, and people have seen their spirits wandering around the building. Kim Jong-il and his dad weren't the greatest of guys when they were alive, so I can only imagine that going to visit them in spirit form probably isn't going to be too much better. Number 2 on this list is the 38th parallel. The 38th parallel, according to Google, is a circle of latitude that is 38 degrees north of Earth's equatorial plane. It crosses Europe, the Mediterranean Sea, Asia, the Pacific Ocean, North America, and the Atlantic Ocean. The 38th parallel north formed the border between North and South Korea prior to the Korean War. This 38th parallel is actually a demilitarized zone between North and South Korea now. This area is really difficult to get across though for your average Joe. It's riddled with landmines, and on either side of the borders there's a sizable military presence just waiting to strike if you do attempt to do anything. Regardless of how dangerous it is to cross though, many North Koreans have attempted to get through this zone and into South Korea to try and escape their current life that they have in their own country. Over the years since this zone has been there, many North Korean citizens have risked their lives trying to get across this place. There have even been stories of people getting in vehicles and just gunning it as fast as they can, hoping to get to the other side. If they do manage to make it the whole way, then South Korea is typically sympathetic to their cause and will invite them into their own country as a Korean citizen. Many of them don't make it though. They're usually gunned down and stopped before they can make it far at all from their own country. Because of this, it's believed this area is haunted by the ghosts of those who tried to make it across and couldn't. These people were so close to salvation but just couldn't quite make it the last little bit, and now their souls forever remain here wishing they could have just pushed a little bit further. Not many people have seen them because this is a super hard area of the world to get to, but those who have said that they look to be in sheer agony, that they cry out and reach for those that they seize in an attempt to get these people to save them. For more reason than one, I don't recommend going to the 38th parallel. Number 1 on this list is Sinchon. The North Korean town of Sinchon is located in the South Hwanghae province of North Korea. This town was apparently the site of what is referred to as the Sinchon massacre. Now the reason that I use the word apparently there is because this massacre is kind of all up in the air. The North Korean government claims that from the 17th of October to the 7th of December, the United States military killed just over 30,000 North Korean citizens. This next part was actually released by the North Korean Central News Agency in 1998, and fair warning, it's pretty graphic in its detail. They say the American soldiers drowned over 2,000 innocent people by dropping them from Soktan Bridge. They also drowned more than 1,000 women in Sowon Reservoir. Upwards of 1,200 patriotic-minded people detained in an ice warehouse were bitten to death by military dogs. The headmaster of Younghae-won of Jungsan Primary School was sawed up alive. They even talk about how the American soldiers performed horrible atrocities on children, but I actually can't even say how they described it on YouTube, or else this video would definitely get taken down. Now, even though this is what the North Koreans have come out and said, the South Koreans heavily dispute this. They say that it was the Korean right-wing extremists and communists who performed these killings. Regardless of who was actually responsible though, or the true death toll figures, something horrible did take place in this town. The atrocity here left its mark, and it's believed that those who were killed haunt this place to this day. The innocent souls still wander around this town and can't find peace. Glowing orbs and ghostly apparitions are regularly spotted here. Number 5 on this list is the Devil's Pond. The Devil's Pond is a very beautiful and calm-looking body of water on the outside, but it's far more dangerous when you step inside. Located in the Queensland forest, the pond itself almost looks like something straight out of a fairy tale, but there's no happy ending here. 19 people have died in this tiny little pond. That's a staggering amount of people considering how small this one area is. In fact, so many people have had tragic endings here that there's literally a sign that says the creek has claimed many lives. Think about that. It sounds like something straight from a Scooby-Doo story. Beware of this pond or else, but like seriously, beware of the pond. An ancient Aboriginal legend tells us of how a runaway bride fell to her death here as she was escaping her wedding. The bride was named Ulana, and it's believed that she is actually the cause of the many deaths that have happened here. It's said that she lures and tricks people into coming towards her, and then they fall in and suffer the same fate that happened to her so many years ago. I'm not sure if the bride legend is true or not, but even if it isn't, this is clearly an incredibly dangerous spot in its own right. Australia is a big place, so don't feel like this is your only option if you're going for a swim when you're there. Number 4 on this list is the National Film and Sound Archive. Located in Canberra, which I actually just discovered is the capital city of Australia. Always thought it was Sydney, but actually it's Canberra, so that's fun. But anyways, the Film and Sound Archive is a staple of media culture in Australia. It just hasn't always been that way. Crypto-naturalist Tim says the NFSA building is regarded by many ghost hunters or paranormal aficionados as not only one of the most haunted in Canberra, but also one of the most haunted in Australia. It's not because it houses spooky movies though. The ghosts that are reported in the building stem from the period that it was the Institute of Anatomy. That's right guys, this building prior to being what it is now was housing and studying dead bodies for 50 whole years. There were countless scientific experiments that went on here on hundreds to potentially even thousands of corpses. During this time, it was a museum as well and showcased the dead bodies to those who visited here. Because of all this death, the place is pretty popular among the ghosts. Apparently, the dissection rooms are the most popular, with many paranormal sightings here over the years. There's also a little girl who many visitors have seen. She lives in the air vents of the building and pops out through the grates every now and again. Luckily enough, her intense intentions aren't evil though, and often tries to make people laugh. That being said, I still don't think that going to this place that used to house a bunch of dead bodies is the best idea. We have Netflix for a reason now, guys, so let's use it. Number 3 on this list is the Beechworth Asylum. Ah yes, the classic haunted asylum. It feels like every country has one, but Australia's is particularly bad. The hospital opened in 1867 and was operational until 1995 when it was finally shut down. During that span, when it was functioning, the asylum had over 3,000 patients die in its walls. That is an absurd number of people for a mental hospital. Part of this was because the methods that they used at this place weren't the best. Like most asylums that started in the 1800s, the treatments that they had for people dealing with mental health problems were far from ideal. Shock therapy, shackling patients up, just blatant torture were all things that went down at this asylum. Obviously, this didn't help anyone in dealing with their issues and caused a lot of people to pass away early. Now, these spirits of those who died here haunt the building. Screams can be heard ringing throughout the walls, with people thinking it's the ghosts of those who were being shocked or tortured. Some have reported seeing the ghosts of nurses walking around the building. These aren't your typical kind nurses though. People have said that they look evil and unforgiving. Deep feelings of depression can be felt here and just a strong feeling of uneasiness. Personally, I see absolutely no reason to visit this horrible place ever, and in all honesty, I'm kind of surprised that the building is still standing. Number 2 on this list is the Monte Cristo Homestead. Built over 150 years ago, this home has had such a tragic history that many believe it to be Australia's most haunted home, and honestly, after reading about the horrific things that happened here, I totally understand why. Australian Geographic writes, a chain of violent events in the house have triggered other supernatural incidents. A maid once plummeted to her death from the upstairs balcony, and the figure of a woman in period dress has been seen walking along the veranda to the blood-stained steps where she fell. A stable boy who burned to death in his bed at the hands of his master is thought to haunt the coach house, while the ghost of a mentally disabled man named Harold wanders the grounds. Kept chained in the caretaker's cottage for 40 years, Harold was found curled up at the feet of his mother's dead body. He died shortly after being sent to a home for the insane. The sound of clanking chains is said to warn of his approach. All of those things are super scary to begin with, but the most cited ghost at this home isn't even mentioned there. Elizabeth Crawley inherited this house from her husband who passed in 1910, and her ghost has never left. After her husband died, she went into a deep depression and would rarely leave the home. She converted one of the upstairs rooms into a space to perform rituals. It's said that after her husband died, she only left this house twice and eventually died in it by herself. Now, you'll know her ghost is present because there'll be a sudden and stark change in temperature whenever she nears. All of this lore has, of course, created a ton of interest around the home, and it's been featured on several Australian ghost television shows through the years. However, you can also stay at this home if you wanted for $200 a night and experience all of this ghostly stuff for yourself. Why you would want to pay $200 of your actual money to get haunted and potentially even cursed is beyond me, but hey, to each their own, I guess. And finally, number 1 on this list is Port Arthur. Port Arthur is located in the Australian state of Tasmania, which is actually an island state 240 kilometers off of the Australian mainland. Port Arthur initially served as a penal site by the British Empire several hundreds of years ago. Towards the end of the 1700s, Britain stopped sending their prisoners to the Americas and instead started shipping them to Australia. What's even better than going to the mainland, though, was this small island state that they also owned in the middle of nowhere. Countless prisoners over the following decades were shipped off to Tasmania, with Port Arthur being one of the biggest final destinations for these criminals. Once they got there, their lives were never the same. Many of these people that were shipped here had committed small crimes out of sheer necessity, stealing some food to survive or something to keep their families warm. The severity of the crime mattered little to the British authorities though, and even if it was something as small and insignificant as this, you could very easily find yourself stuck in this prison for the remainder of your life. The prisoners that got sent here were forced to work tirelessly in the timber, lumbering, and shipbuilding industries. Port Arthur actually boomed for the next 100 years, with more and more convicts being sent here. This was obviously very beneficial for the British government, but not so much so for the people who had to make this place their home. Many of them were mercilessly killed for no good reason. They were often tortured consistently if they weren't working hard enough or had done something that wasn't totally up to the standard. It really was a horrible way of life for those who got sent to Port Arthur. At around the end of the 1800s, Port Arthur started to slow down and eventually stopped altogether. The death of this location didn't end though, because in 1996, Port Arthur saw one of Australia's darkest moments ever. 35 people were gunned down in a mass shooting that took place at Port Arthur. All of this death from various generations has caused Port Arthur to be one of Australia's most haunted spots. In fact, over the years, there have been more than 2,000 incidents of unexplained paranormal activity. Things moving, voices shrieking, change in temperature, you name it, it's taken place at this location before. The asylum at Port Arthur is said to be the most haunted spot here, with reports of people getting scratched and touched by unseen entities. Port Arthur has had a horrible history to it, and it's not a place I'd recommend venturing out to if you do happen to catch yourself in the Australian state of Tasmania.